There's a couple of things that interest me about the Washington Wizards. Now, after they made the trades, I was considering making a video, and then I was like, how is the Washington Wizards video going to perform? I guess you guys are going to have to determine that. Let me know if you want to see more of this content, because, I mean, I can make more Wizards videos if you want to see it. But anyways, they interest me for a couple of reasons, because you're looking at a very, very different team. For one, last year they made the playoffs, and it was based off star power. It was based off Russell Westbrook having a really good second half of the season, Bradley Beal being as good as he has been the last couple of years, being a dominant scorer and a dominant player. Now, they've kept Beal, so they still have that star power, but you had two stars and pretty much whatever else that was. I looked through, they had 17 different starters. 17. Now, a couple of those guys just played one game, but in general, they had Raul Neto starting games. Alex Len started 40 games. Alex Len started 40 games. There's going to be none of that nonsense this year. They're not going to have those kind of starters this year because they've added depth. You can't question their depth now. They have depth in talent, and that's what's interesting to me, because you look at last year where they had Westbrook and Beal, where it's like those are the star players, but around them, what is around them? Nothing really. Now this season, they've got Bradley Beal, and maybe Rui Hachimura eventually turns into a star. Maybe that's the case. I mean, Spencer Dinwiddie said he was joining a big three in Washington. Maybe it's a little bit premature to say that, and I don't know if he's a part of the big three, but he did say Rui and Beal made up a big three alongside himself. Maybe he's going to be proven correct. But you've got depth alongside Bradley Beal with guys now. You can look at 9 to 10 players on this team that you're confident going out there and doing a good job, as opposed to last year where it was like, 6 to 7 at times? That's the contrast. That's what I'm interested in seeing. There's also a couple of storylines. I'm interested to see what Rui Hachimura can do this season. Made a video on him potentially breaking out this season. I think he's got a fair bit left in the tank to prove. Kyle Kuzma's coming to a new team. What can he do? Spencer Dinwiddie's coming off an injury. There's a lot of reasons to actually be interested in this Washington Wizards team. I'm not going to lie. And, well, I'm going to talk about that. Before I do that, if you could drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, that would be much appreciated. Also, shout out to this team. If you know who it is, let me know. But anyways, let's talk about it. Straight off the bat, we need to talk about the move that was Russell Westbrook for the package that included Kyle Kuzma, KCP, Montrezl Harrell, and the 22nd pick, which they ended up trading and got Isaiah Todd, Aaron Holiday. I can talk about that. I'll just get that out of the way. I don't know too much about Isaiah Todd, Aaron Holiday. He's a good defensive guard off the bench. I don't know if he's going to be great. I guess if he improves his offense, he could be cool, but it's an interesting move. Also, Corey Kispert, we'll get that out of the way. Shooting. By a lot of reports, best shooter in the draft. Not by a lot. He is the best shooter in the draft by pretty much everyone. He's going to move off the ball. He's going to be ready to come in and make an impact, and I think he could be a decent enough defender as well. So that's what you got in the draft. Let's get that out of the way, and let's talk about this trade, which was Kyle Kuzma, KCP, and Montrezl Harrell. Some people were saying the Wizards got fleeced. I don't know if anyone with actually a logical brain believes that. This is a big contract. Russell Westbrook is overpaid. He's overpaid. Is he still a good player? Yes. That doesn't mean he can't be overpaid. He's getting towards the end of his career. He has had injury problems. So to get off of him for Kyle Kuzma, who is a good young player. I know people like to criticize him, like to make fun of him because of all the stuff he does do off the court, I guess, and sometimes on the court, but he's a good young player. KCP is only 28, which kind of surprised me, and Montrezl Harrell is about the same age as well, coming off a Sixth Man of the Year just the year before, so he's still a pretty good player, Montrezl Harrell. At the very least, he's going to give you buckets off the bench, pick and roll partner for Bradley Beal, Spencer Dinwiddie. But I want to start talking about Kuzma. I'll talk about Beal, Hachimura, don't worry about that, but I want to start by talking about Kuzma because he is interesting. You look at his career trajectory, but you look at that and you see someone who started out of the gates as a scorer, Summer League MVP, house on fire, all of those things. And people are thinking this could be an all-star level player, and then brings in AD. He thought he was a part of a big three. No one else thought that. He was the only one. So his shots went down, but he's actually improved as a player since year 2. He's become a better defender, a more reliable three-point shooter, shot about 37% off catch and shoot threes on a lot of attempts this season, which is impressive. That's the kind of shooting you want alongside Bradley Beal. And we know, we've already seen it in his early NBA career, that he can score given the opportunity. So if you can combine the two, where he has the defense, the rebounding, the shooting, and the scoring that he showed earlier in his career when he actually got the attempts, you're looking at a pretty good player. To get him $13 million a year for the next 2 years, is it a steal? I'd say it's a good contract. We may as well just talk about KCP briefly. There's not as much to talk about when it comes to KCP, but he's a good player. Again, similar to Kuzma, but this is just the reality of being a Lakers player, isn't it? At one point, KCP was considered just whatever he was considered, it was bad, and he's just a good player. He's a good 3-and-D wing. He'll give you some defense, and he'll shoot over 40% from three like he did last season, and the year before he shot 38.5%. So he's going to be in that range. Solid player. As I said, he's only 28, which kind of surprised me. Just a good player to pick up. Montrezl Harrell coming off the bench also is intriguing. Averaged damn near 20 points a game for the Clippers the season before. Nearly 20 points a game off the bench. I know that Lou Will pick and roll was lethal, and he might not have that same kind of pick and roll partner heading into this season, but damn, if he can give you those kind of numbers again, 16 to 17 points a game, probably coming off the bench, I'd imagine you have Gafford starting, given the defensive boost he gave this team. Everyone talked about Westbrook and Beal and all the star power down the stretch, which rightfully so, they played well, but the defense turned around once Gafford came into that team and gave them some rim protection, some rim running, and just overall a really improved game as opposed to Alex Len, as opposed to that. Now you've got some center rotation, you've got Thomas Bryant, you've got Daniel Gafford, and you've got Harrell. So if Harrell can't perform in the playoffs again, if you do make the playoffs, you're not too worried. But what he does in the regular season can't be questioned. High motor, skilled guy for a big man, and he's just going to give you points. He's just simply going to give you production. He's proven that, and if he can get back to his best, that's another fantastic player to get. For me, you got three fantastic role players. Kuzma probably has the most intrigue and the most upside, and KCP and Harrell are known quantities, one of them being a championship level quality player who did well for the Lakers, and the other one being a sixth man of the year. Is that not what you'd want in a return for someone who's a hefty contract? Yes, he is still a star-ish level player, Russell Westbrook, but to get that return, I would absolutely love that if I was a Wizards fan. I would absolutely love that, and that's my thoughts on that. Spencer Dinwiddie, Bradley Beal, Montrezl Harrell pick and roll is going to be interesting. Bradley Beal's a really good pick and roll ball handler. Spencer Dinwiddie was pretty good as well his last season in Brooklyn. And I guess we're going to have to talk about Dinwiddie again. I'll talk about the guys on this existing roster in a bit, but talking about Dinwiddie, the only concern you'd really have over Dinwiddie is his efficiency, is his shoot. Is he actually going to fit well alongside Beal? Is he going to give him enough spacing? And although Dinwiddie's shooting percentages are kind of rough to look at, he did shoot 37% on catch and shoot threes his last full season healthy in Brooklyn, which is promising. That's something to work with if he can just limit what he's doing off the dribble, or at least improve one of the two. If he can just consistently shoot 35 to 36% from three, that's huge, because we know what else he brings. He's a physical guard that can get to the rim. He's going to be able to get downhill. Yes, he's coming off an ACL injury. Obviously, that's another question mark that I need to mention, but we've seen a lot of players recover from ACL injuries. We have seen it in multiple sports. It's an injury that doctors and physios have a pretty good idea of now, so I'd expect him to come back pretty well. 3 years, $60 million deal. He's in the prime of his career. Physical, big body. He does have a little bit of upside as well, because we haven't really seen him given a full opportunity to be that guy. I mean, in Brooklyn, he was coming off the bench up until he started really balling out, and then obviously got his starting spot and had a fantastic season. But now he's going to be fully ingrained in this Wizards team. He's got a backcourt partner in Bradley Beal that's going to help him out. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about Dinwiddie's return and being good. If he can get that three-point percentage up and consistent, he does a lot of things else that you're going to be happy to see. And now talking about some of the guys that are already on the team that have been on the roster that I'm also interested about. And yes, Russ is good, but you do get some benefits from letting him go and now bringing in some shooting. And we're going to see some of their younger guys get more opportunity. And the two obvious ones that come to mind are Deni Avdija and obviously Rui Hachimura. I want to start with Rui because I mentioned it briefly, made a breakout video on him, and I expect big things from Rui. More opportunity. There were a couple of months in last season where he averaged 17 points a game for an extended period of time. That's kind of where you want to see him get to. He averaged more points a game in the second half of the season. He looked better for Japan. He was good in the Olympics. I know he's the Japanese Michael Jordan for them, so it's a little bit different. He's not getting quite that opportunity, but he should get more opportunity. He's going to thrive in the mid-range. If he can get to the free throw line a little bit more, given his strong build and his athleticism, that's somewhere where he should be able to thrive at. He's going to get more opportunities. There's more spacing around him. He improved as a three-point shooter. I'm excited to see what Rui can do. I really think he could blossom this season with the spacing around him, the added spacing, the added opportunity, the added responsibility coming off a high in the Olympics. Well, I mean, relatively speaking, because they did lose every single game, but he got opportunity to thrive as the guy, and hopefully he gets some opportunities during this season as well to be the guy. And then Deni Avdija, he's obviously not as long in his development as Rui, but he showed some glimpses last year. He's going to get some more ball handling opportunity. Hopefully he can show off his playmaking, which is something coming out of the draft that was a huge strength for him and something we didn't see enough of. Hopefully he gets a little bit more opportunity for that and just develops. That's what I want to see from Denny. I don't expect as big of things as I expect from Rui because he's not as far along, but hopefully he becomes a good player off the bench, a good guy that you can bring in, adds a different element. He can be a good enough three-point shooter and give you some playmaking / also cutting to the rim and whatnot. That's what I want to see from Denny. I was supposed to mention him earlier in the video, but I did forget, so apologies to Montrezl Jr., but I forgot to mention him. But also, that's a coaching adjustment that should be good. Scott Brooks wasn't really working out in Washington. We all know that he wasn't really working out. I don't really speak too much about coaches until I've actually seen them coach. It's kind of hard to do. I know he was an assistant coach and did a good job in Denver by all reports, but I just kind of need to see it before I can say much. But if he's a defensive-minded coach, this was a team where they do need to build an identity. That's one thing when it comes to Washington. My hopes of them are increasing the more I talk about them and the more I look into their depth and their team and the talent that they have, which is pretty high. They do need to build some kind of identity because they are middle of the pack, below middle of the pack in both departments last season. They did improve defensively when Gafford came in. Maybe defensively will be their calling card. Aaron Holiday was a defensive-minded guy to bring in. They brought in Daniel Gafford, obviously, last season. Spencer Dinwiddie can play defense. Kyle Kuzma is a pretty good defender now. Yes, KCP is a good defender. Rui Hachimura can defend. You've got guys now that can defend. Montrezl Jr. is supposed to be a defensive-minded coach, maybe even a defensive-minded mastermind. That's what some reports have said. If they can start to become a good defense, Bradley Beal is going to create offense for sure. Can he make that superstar leap as well? Another thing that I want to just mention briefly. Can he make that leap? The James Harden kind of leap. I know. It might be a stretch, but can he do that? He's improved every single season. And these are the most favorable circumstances since he's been a star, with the shooting around him and with him undoubtedly being the number one guy. I know he was last year, but he's now undoubtedly the number one guy. There's shooting around him. There's spacing around him. There's a new coach. Can he take that leap? It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. So that's another thing that I'm looking out for. I feel like I do it to myself whenever I talk about a team, but the more and more I talk about the Wizards, the more and more I'm convinced that they're going to be a pretty good team this year. Again, I don't know what their calling card is going to be. Is it going to be defense? Is it going to be offense with their newfound shooting? Beal maybe going to another level. We're going to have to wait and see. That's what I'm curious to see, alongside these guys making their marks in their new Wizards colors. Anyways, that's my thoughts on the Washington Wizards. I think they had a great offseason, their best offseason they've had in a very long time, and I'm interested to see what they can do. Very interested.